At sunrise, a dying bobcat lifts his head, and a stranger at the mesh whispers, "No surprises!" The cat steps toward the light, then freezes. Recognition? Hours later, sirens, crates, a vanishing act. Who is she to him? "Take the light, not me," she says. Miracle or mistake, and what happens when the door finally opens? Frost rims the chain link like pale lace, and the morning holds its breath. Through a high window, a narrow sunbeam drops to the concrete, one bright rectangle ticking the hour in light. Inside the enclosure, the bobcat labeled Patient 47 crouches in the lee of a rock shelf, coat roughened by old cold, eyes the color of old honey catching and releasing the beam as it moves. Outside the safety mesh, Riley Shaw stands in a green plaid shirt and field coat, boots planted, hands loose at her sides. She does not reach. She lets stillness do the speaking. Her breath ghosts the air and thins. "Easy," she says, no more than warm air shaped into a syllable. The bobcat's ears tilt toward the sound, then toward the light. On the monitor wall in the control room, Camila Ortiz leans toward a grainy feed. "Wait, look at that body language," she whispers, as if sound could travel through cables and spook the moment. A volunteer beside her murmurs, "Is he bristling?" Camilla shakes her head. "No. Watch the shoulders." Microbeats gather like small bells. The animal's blink rate slows, whiskers spread. The ridge of muscle between shoulder blades unknots. The tail tip loosens and sketches a quiet punctuation mark on the concrete. He shifts, not to hide, but to angle one eye into the square of sun, as if the warmth were a memory he trusts more than any human thing. Riley holds her ground. "No surprises," she breathes. "I'm right here." The beam slides a finger's width. Patient 47 steps, then pauses, then steps again, each movement weighed against the fence and the light. Chain links cast a lattice across his flank, bars made only of shadow. Camilla notes the distance aloud, voice steady. 3 meters, 2.5. The room forgets to exhale. The push and pull continues. Stillness answered by a measured approach, fear threaded with curiosity. Outside the mesh is winter. Within the sun square is something like permission. The question rises and hangs between heartbeat and step. Can a truly wild bobcat remember a human? Right now. Months earlier, the fields lay fallow and stiff, a quilt of frost stitched with mouse paths and last year's stubble. At the edge of the property, a tired barn slouched into the hedgerow, its roof patched with a dull tin square that caught sunrise like a mirror shard. Through a gap in the siding, a blade of light fell across dust and spider silk, making the air look warm while the morning stayed bitter cold. Riley Shaw came along the survey track, listening to the wind move through corn husks. She paused. Inside the barn, beyond a hanging door, a single thread of vapor pulsed in the light. One breath, small and fragile, glittering before it vanished. She stepped to the threshold and waited. The smell met her first, hay gone sour, oil, iron, old rain. Against a tumble of bales lay a bobcat, a compact body curled too tight, fur clumped by damp, paws tucked like stones. The breaths were shallow, mechanical, as if borrowed. Ears flattened, not in threat, but in a kind of surrender. Riley turned sideways, making herself narrow, and lowered her gaze to the scuffed floor. "No surprises," she whispered. "I'm just here to help." The cat's whiskers trembled, barely. She eased the phone from her pocket and dialed the state rehab hotline. A calm voice answered. Riley described what she saw: hypothermic signs, impaired responsiveness, no obvious bleeding, ambient temperature near freezing. "Do not touch," the dispatcher said. "Create shelter, minimize stress, keep distance." "Copy." Riley said softly. "I'll stay until your team gets here." The beam inched along the bales, bright, ruler straight. Riley knelt just outside its path, keeping the opening clear, body angled, so the cat could slip past if fear returned. "You don't owe me," she said, voice barely air. "You decide every step." From the hedgerow, light deepened to honey. Frost began to lift in hairline curls. The bobcat's eyelids fluttered and settled. Riley anchored herself to quiet. "I'll stay till help arrives," she promised the cold and the animal both. And the promise warmed the floorboards by one small, patient degree today. Riley studied the doorway and the slant of morning. The tin patch above threw a clean blade of brightness, but it fell a hand's width shy of the bobcat's rib cage. She moved to the wall, careful of every scuff, and lifted a cracked handheld mirror from a nail-studded shelf. The glass was spidered, the wooden handle was slick with years of oil and dust. Her phone lay speaker up on a grain sack. Camilla's voice carried through static. "No contact. Keep the sun on core. Drafts away from him if you can." "Copy," Riley murmured. She tilted the mirror until the beam hopped from timber to floor to the bobcat's flank. Straw glowed as if lit from inside, dust motes drifted like slow gold. The animal did not start. He watched the moving square with one half-lidded eye. She stayed side on, eyes lowered. "The light's yours," she breathed. "Take what you want." She worked by inches, dragging a tarp with her boot to plug a gap, building a berm of straw along the wall. The beam slid, the mirror followed. The sun marked a quiet metronome on the cat's fur. Neck, shoulder, then the thin stretch of chest where heat mattered most. Breaths lengthened. From counting stones to counting waves. A whisker twitched. The paws unclenched a fraction. Camilla listened to the cadence through the phone and said, almost to herself, "That's good. That's very good." Riley swallowed the urge to speak in full sentences. She gave him weather instead. "Clear until noon. Ridge, winds later. You can keep the corner if you want." Outside, crows bargained with the day. Inside, the barn settled, timber to timber. When the beam brushed his face, the bobcat slit his eyes to the brightness, then let the lids fall to a drowse. He shifted, not away from her, but toward the straw-warmed strip, as if finding a familiar border in the smell of sun on hay. The distance between them held, measured, and respectful. Far off, a siren rose, softened by miles of stubble and frost. Riley did not look back. "Help's coming," she said. "You set the rules." The mirror wobbled. She steadied it. Heat pooled, slow and certain. A small strength returned, enough for him to gather himself and stand, legs a little drunken, and step to a safer shadow that still kept the light. "I'll find you again," Riley promised. "I will." Dawn after dawn, Riley parked and walked the long way, letting the field swallow her steps. She set a dish of water beyond the threshold, not in his path, but in its weather shadow, then stood with her shoulder to the opening, gaze on the scuffed plank seam. "Clear sky till mid-morning," she said softly. By noon, the roof throws a second beam. Frost feathered the threshold, breath unspooled in thin ribbons. The barn listened. The bobcat appeared, where the light knifed down the wall, a stillness inside stillness. He did not beg, did not bluff. He watched. When his ears lifted, Riley angled her body smaller. "No surprises," she breathed. "You call the distance." She never crossed in, she never coaxed. She let light draw any line needed. She did not leave food. Camilla's guidance held like a rail. No provisioning, no shortcuts that would bind the animal to people instead of place. Riley honored it like farmers honor weather, planning around what can't change. Water, yes. Quiet, yes. Everything else is yours, she murmured to rafters as much as to him. In her field notebook she wrote, beneath a sketch of the tin patch and its morning angles, a private name, Solstice. Not a handle to call him with, only a way to file the memory of where light divides the day. Next lines, 30 min, 26 min to 22 minutes. The days breathed and exhaled. A week later, 20 minutes. Camilla texted a single check mark and later, hold the line. Signs of mending arrived without ceremony. His coat dried to a workable lay. His stride gathered so the hind paws landed near the front paws prints. On cold mornings, he set a forepaw into the beam and felt it like a rumour. Riley kept her promises pared to bone. "I'll give you room," she said. "I'll keep the door clear." Sometimes his ear flicked, a small consent, like a pin set true on a map. She nodded and stepped back, not from fear, but respect for the rule they were writing together, one quiet visit at a time. Snow came early, a squall scrawling white over the stubble while the barn roof pinged with cold. Riley cut the engine and listened. The field made the sound of paper being folded. No sun yet, only a pewter light that erased edges. At the threshold, she saw it, a confusion of tracks broken like a sentence dragged mid-word. Forepaws planted, hind feet skittering, then a trench, a fan of claw marks and a dent where a body had rolled. The beam of morning, when it finally found the tin, fell harmlessly on emptiness. "Solstice," she said, a breath that fogged and vanished. She did not step inside. She walked the perimeter, reading the hedgerow as surveyors read contours. 50 yards east, under a cedar, a box trap sat cocked and mud-scabbed. The door was wired to a milk jug filled with gravel. It had been sprung. On the lower grid, a tuft of tan fur clung to a smear of frozen blood. Riley took photos, wide then close, and called the hotline. "Possible illegal take," she said. "Box trap, fresh sign, animal likely injured." The dispatcher's tone tightened. "Document everything. Do not follow any vehicle if you see one. I'm notifying wildlife and the sheriff." A pickup rattled down the county road. The driver slowed, then kept going. Riley logged time. Temperature, wind, coordinates. She called Camilla next. "He's gone." Silence hummed. "I'm looping in the task force. These guys sell across state lines." "Exotics?" Riley asked. "Sometimes. Nuisance control as cover. Expect fast movement." Riley crouched by the fence post where she had once left water. The sun tried and failed to break the overcast. A thin brightness whitened the snow without warming it. "You picked your steps," she said to the cold. "Now I pick mine." Deputy lights smeared the drifts blue, then red. Statements, tape, boot prints, the thud of doors. Riley's breath plumed while she answered. "Yes, I've been monitoring." "No."
"I never fed?" "Yes, I can identify markings." When the scene quieted, she touched the post with her glove. "I will find you," she said, "wherever they take you." The crate vibrated like a tired drum as straps bit the plywood and diesel pressed its breath through vents. Patient 47 braced in the back corner, not in surrender, but in the long, coiled patience of weather. Through the punched metal, he saw world broken into slivers. Lane lines, a guardrail, the smear of passing fields, scentless. Headlights wove over the wood, an artificial moon in phases. Inside, the light was wrong. Fluorescence that buzzed, scanner beams.
The ghost strobe of a phone. Each time brightness cut the crate, his pupils tightened, then steadied. Waiting was a shape he understood. "Keep it level," a man muttered. "Exotics don't like bruises." Another voice laughed low. "Tag says farm nuisance. Cash only." A woman raised her phone. The shutter popped. "Nice coat," she said. "He'll fetch double up north." Warehouse, concrete, a row of eyes in boxes. The bobcat counted air like coins and found it enough. He pressed his muzzle to the slits, taking in oil, rope, the metallic tea of blood. He neither struck nor begged. He measured. Elsewhere, maps brightened. Camilla Ortiz held a phone to one ear and a stylus in the other. Freight routes threaded the state. Partial plate from a neighbor, she told the agent. F-250, grey, toolbox. They favor the river road. A cursor blinked near an old transfer yard. The agent said, "We're seeing chatter. Stand by." Riley sat in her truck with the heater off, scrolling classifieds that were not quite honest. Posts for ranch guardians, barn cat special, no questions. She traced phone numbers to throwaway accounts and listened to voicemails where voices became careful ghosts. She texted a message she had rewritten 20 times. "If this is about a bobcat, he is protected. Return him now." The van stopped, then backed. Doors clanged. "Third bay," someone called. The crate slid, bumped, steadied. "No fingerprints," the first voice said. "We swap crates at midnight." A strip light hummed into a headache of white. The bobcat kept to the corner, tail wrapped like a question he would not ask aloud. In the crate beside him, a fox exhaled a high thread of fear. He angled his face away from the glare, reserving the untouched part of his gaze for a window that wasn't here. "Soon," Camilla said to the empty office. "Hold on." Riley to the steering wheel. "I'm coming." The bobcat to the dark, waiting.
Sirens braided the night into hard blue and red, and the warehouse woke like a struck hive. Boots hammered. A ram hit the side door. Metal screamed, then folded. "Police! Hands visible!" Lights strobed across stacked crates, across eyes that flashed and went still. Noise rose like weather and broke. In Bay 3, the bobcat blinked against the seizure of colour. He did not lunge. He made himself narrow and quiet, a stone at the bottom of a fast river. The crate beside him rattled once, then fell into heavy animal silence. A figure moved differently from the others, low center, palms open, breath measured.
Officer Lena Park crouched to crate level and angled her body sideways so she wasn't a wall. "Easy, cat," she said. "No surprises tonight." Behind her, someone killed the nearest strip light. The buzzing died. The dark softened. Camilla Ortiz stepped through the wedge of door, transport team close with carriers and blankets. She smelled bleach, cold metal, old urine. Her eyes found the tag, farm nuisance, transfer. The handwriting was careful and false. "We've got him," she told the agent on her radio. "Thin, dehydrated, responsive." The bobcat lifted his head at the cadence of her voice. Camilla knelt, matching Officer Park's posture. "We see you," she said. "We're changing the light." A tech tilted a lamp toward the ceiling so it spilled gentler, indirect. Shadows stopped chopping the air. Paperwork fluttered on a clipboard, a trail of names pretending to be routes. A dispatch note flagged an old complaint from a farm road and a box trap. Park tapped the page. "Likely same animal," she said. "Door latch, not the hinges," Camilla reminded. "Slow hands, quiet metal." The crate opened by degrees, no grab, no hook. The bobcat's ears tipped forward, nostrils worked, tail unscrolled a finger's length. "Take the breath you need," Park murmured. Camilla laid a towel to bridge the crate and carrier. "This way is out," she said, giving the corridor of air a name. The bobcat chose it. Then the sirens were far again, and the room remembered how to be still. The rehabilitation center sat on the city's edge, concrete corridors, measured air, bleach scented. Hundreds of miles from the barn, patient 47 entered quarantine, double doors, negative pressure, clipboards that replaced weather. Fluorescence hummed a thin, relentless noon. The room offered safety, not sky. Through mesh, he watched movement fade, then curled beneath his shelf and went still. Camilla Ortiz adjusted the sign to quiet protocol and unfolded a metal chair beside the observation mesh. She set a paperback on her knee and kept her eyes lowered. She did not count minutes aloud, she counted breaths. "No surprises," she said each morning, the phrase warm as tea. Her posture made a door where the real door would stay closed. He ate irregularly, nights mostly, and when the building slept. Pacing left a pale figure 8 in dust. The glare needled his eyes, so he chose the dimmest corner and stared at nothing. Camilla took notes: latency to feed, total distance, blink rate, grooming absent. She killed 2 bulbs, then 3. The room softened, but the light was the wrong kind. No angle, no hour. On day 4, she climbed a ladder to a high window and measured where dawn slipped in. The next morning, a plywood baffle sent a clean stripe down to a flat-top rock she'd salvaged. The stripe moved as minutes did, a metronome made of light. Heat held in the stone. The room learned a rhythm the building had forgotten. She said little, only anchors. "We changed the room, not you." Later, "The light is yours," a volunteer whispered. "Will he ever trust people?" Camilla shook her head. Trust is not the goal, calm is. She turned a page and let silence finish the sentence. Small victories came without applause. A full drink at noon, pacing that broke, then stopped. Camilla breathed, steady again. One careful step into the sun stripe, then another. The tail loosened as if a fist unclenched. At last, a miracle, he sat on the warmed stone and washed his foreleg, slow as weather remembering spring. The mesh held the line, the light opened the room. Paperwork turned like a mill wheel for weeks. Then Riley signed the line and passed through the doors with a visitor badge clipped to her coat. Camilla met her in the corridor and gestured to the bay. "Corridor cleared, minimal staff, sunstripe set," she said.
Voice soft to leave no wake. Inside, the room waited in a hush. The baffle's geometry placed a bright square on the floor, the same size it had been in the barn by chance and care. Dust lifted and fell like tiny, slow snow. Riley stood a pace from the mesh, turned slightly sideways, hands loose, gaze lowered to the seam where light met concrete. From under the shelf, Patient 47 watched the room without moving his body. He read air first, then sound, then the outline of a human who did not reach. Somewhere a thermostat ticked. Beyond that, only breath. He pushed his nose into the light as if tasting a question. The ears canted forward.
Blink, long. Another. The tail's last vertebra uncoiled like a small comma finding its place. Camilla stayed back by the monitor car, whispering for the record. Baseline distance 2.8 meters, tension low across shoulders, no pilo erection. A volunteer pressed a hand to their mouth. "Is he coming out?" Camilla did not answer yet. Riley breathed once, slow. "Nothing is asked of you," she murmured. "Take the light, not me." The words fell no louder than dust. The Bobcat stepped to the edge of the square and paused, measuring. Then he crossed the boundary he had set for every other human. One step, another. Each footfall placed with the care of a creature that has learned the price of noise. He angled his body so the warmth soaked the chest, then turned his face toward the mesh, toward Riley, and held. Camilla let out half a breath. "That's recognition," she said, stunned and delighted in the same small sound. "He's differentiating. This is individual-specific approach." Riley did not move. "I see you," she said, "and I'll keep my distance." The Bobcat's eyes, old honey in the square of light, softened into something that was not fear and not hunger. The room felt the current reverse. The fence remained, but it no longer divided the only important thing. They stood like that, animal, woman, and the mathematics of sunlight, until the square slid a finger's width and the moment set like amber. Days took on a measured cadence, morning light, the square on stone, a woman at the mesh who would not cross it. With Riley's regular presence, appetite returned from its thin edge. He ate earlier, then in the open, then while the sun still braided the floor. The coat that had dulled to felt began to lie smooth. Tufts arranged themselves into their old grammar. Scars hid under a healthier sheen. Pacing shortened, then broke into curious arcs that touched new corners and retreated without panic. Camilla logged the change with the care of a cartographer. Latency to feed dropped by minutes and then by whole quarters of an hour. Space use broadened from the back left quadrant to a full circuit. Blink rates slowed, grooming sessions lengthened, tail posture strung fewer hard exclamation points across the day. Rate of improvement is atypical, she recorded. Environmental modifications held constant. Variable difference, consistent human presence, one individual. Riley kept her rituals small. She read the weather aloud like scripture. High clouds by noon, wind shift at the ridge, the roof will throw a second stripe today. She never reached, never offered. Her voice made rooms, and then she left them intact. You decide, she said, the way she'd said it in the barn. He tested the perimeter of trust the way animals test ice. One paw, then another, weight distributed. He lay in the sun patch and closed his eyes fully for the first time here. He yawned, unguarded, that cavernous cat yawn that turns menace into domestic comedy. Then he slept, the breath deep and even. A volunteer whispered, "What are we doing that works?" Camilla answered, not looking away from the chart. "We are keeping promises," she said. Later to the file. Accelerated recovery attributable to presence therapy. Response appears individual specific. She underlined the last two words. One afternoon the building coughed a power flicker and the fluorescence snapped back on. He startled, rose, almost bolted. Riley spoke before the second heartbeat. "I'm here," she said, steady as the seam in the floor. No surprises. He checked the door, checked the voice, and settled again. "Hold the line," Camilla reminded the team. "He leads, we follow." Riley breathed, slow and ordinary. "Take what you want," she told the air and the animal both. "The rest belongs to the light." Outside, winter thinned. Inside, breath lengthened, and trust learned its measure again, daily. Late winter sun lay low over the ridge as the transport truck eased to a stop beside the protected field. Wind skated the grass, combing pale seed heads flat. On the old boundary stones, sunlight pooled like warm metal. The crate door faced the slope where the barn roof flashed, tin fixed, not perfect, still bright. Riley stood well back, boots in frost, hands at her sides. Camilla and the land manager kept farther yet, radios quiet, faces turned away to make less of themselves. Riley said one line to the cold air, hardly voice at all. "Welcome home." The latch lifted with soft metal, not a clatter. Inside, patient 47 gathered himself and scented the seam where indoor ended. Balsam, mouse tunnels, a wick of creek water, old hay, the faint, remembered tang of tin warmed by sun. The world arrived in pieces, and then as a whole. He stepped down, toes touching earth the way a diver touches the surface, testing, then through. His tail wrote a single mark and stilled. He stood still long enough to feel heat rise from the stone, then turned his head toward the ridge, not the people. Riley did not call, did not lift a hand. No surprises, she breathed. A private pledge. Camilla's voice, quieter still. Door is a suggestion, not a command. The bobcat moved, low and deliberate, slipping through hawkweed and shadow. Where the wind carried human scent, he curved away. Where it carried field and barn, he flowed forward. 50 yards out, he paused, angled back, no human word for the gesture, and gave the tiniest nod of composure, or memory, or nothing we should claim. After that day, he was seen as if by permission. Trail cameras showed him at dawn along the hedgerow. Researchers familiar to him could look once and keep moving, and he might remain. Tourists arrived with engines and bright jackets, and the cat dissolved into grass before their sentences finished. The door closed, the field kept its breath, and the sun kept time on stone. On the ridge, tin flashed once, then settled back into ordinary sky again. Years unspooled in weather, thaws that smelled of iron, summers with crickets for rain, the brittle hymn of winter returning. Trail cameras stitched the seasons into proof. In one frame, he crossed a snow-shouldered swale. In the next, a sleek female paced a half-length behind, head high, eyes lit with honey. In the lab, staff leaned over the screen. "Dawn," a tech said, pointing at first light on her shoulders. Camilla nodded. "For records only, names are for papers, not for calling into fields." A season later, cameras caught blurs of spots, kits tumbling by a sun-gilded thicket, ears too big for reckless feet. Riley found the tracks at daybreak, small parentheses of paws stitched between her own prints. She stood by the barn line and let the morning do the talking. "Grow where the light finds you," she murmured, though no one required language. Downfield, a cat sat inside milkweed, neither hiding nor inviting, visible by choice. When an engine clattered on the road, the grass swallowed him like a closing book. Camilla's paper, Presence-Aided Rehabilitation Outcomes in Non-Imprinted Felids, circulated beyond the county. Grants arrived like warm fronts, property lines shifted, the reserve grew to include the hedgerow, the ridge shelf, and a ragged necklace of vernal pools. New signs read, "Observe softly, no baiting, give room." At a board meeting, a trustee asked, "Does presence really change outcomes?" Camilla replied, "Presence that asks nothing, yes." She wrote the ethic in the protocols in a single clean line, no habituation, only recognition. Field trainings echoed it during every new volunteer's first morning. Most dawns, Riley walked the quiet route. Tin on the barn lifted a sliver of gold into hedges, frost smoked and vanished. Sometimes he appeared where light braided grass gave one brief, ordinary look and returned to being wild. She did not count visits, she kept promises. "Take the light, I'll take the hint," she said, smiling into the chill. Families out for weekend drives saw only fields. The kits learned good shadows and the scent of engines. Day broke again. Each morning, the sun kept the appointment they understood. Riley rose before Frost could decide the color of the day. Knees stiff, she climbed the barn roof with a driver clipped to her belt. A loose panel chattered in the wind. When she eased it flat, the morning bit a wedge of light into the shed below. Exactly as before, a rectangle lay down like memory. She rested on the ridge, breath turning to silver thread. The fields wore winter close, but the light moved like a promise kept. In the hush, she heard mice under snow and the hinge groan of a gate, nothing human and known. At the beam's edge, the bobcat appeared, grizzled, deliberate, old power, slowed into intention. Scar tissue furred smooth along his shoulder, the tail wrote a question mark, and stilled. He stopped where warmth began, where the sun had set its boundaries so many years ago. Riley did not wave. She let her hands hang open against denim. "No surprises," she whispered. The old vow turned softer with age. The wind carried her breath away before it could touch him. They held the distance together, a measured span neither would trespass. In it lived the barn's first winter, warehouse glare, chair by the mesh, the crate's open door, and every dawn since. The light did the speaking. It reached him, it reached her, it reached the roof tin, and made of the three a single, quiet chord. He lifted his face into the wedge.
Amber eyes taking the warmth as if sipping from a familiar cup. She felt the moment close like a hand around a small truth. "Thank you for keeping your wild," she said, not to claim, only to name the emptiness between as a kind of grace. The bobcat turned his head, a gesture like a nod, or a coincidence the human heart insists on reading, and stepped back into grass that hid colour from winter. No rustle, no goodbye, just the beam, the look, and air holding its breath. Riley tightened the last screw. "Go on," she said, smiling. "The light knows the way." The roof settled gently once. The morning moved on, records are updated, fences move,
Weather circles back through its liturgies. Some names on the permits change, some boots in the mud don't, and still the morning opens its small cathedral over the ridge. The light keeps its appointments. Riley, older, shows new techs the barn line and the hedgerow gate. She teaches them where not to stand, how to angle their bodies so space can breathe. "Sometimes all we add is warmth and room," she says, and lets the quiet finish the lesson. On a clipboard, she writes the only instruction that never expires: leave a path. Camilla's framework becomes policy with plain words that travel, replicate natural light, minimize glare. Seat observers at the perimeter. Record blink rates, latency to feed, breath and grooming. Design for light, measure for trust, intervene the least. She tells a room of wardens and volunteers. The sentence, a bridge between disciplines that rarely meet. In the hedgerow at first light, a young bobcat pauses where the beam angles across frost. He does not know the story, but his pause is the same. Ears cupping the world, breath braided with steam, one paw held above the glittering grass. When the sun moves a hand's width, he moves too, fading into scrub on the far side of knowing. The legacy holds without fanfare, not ownership, recognition. Not rescue as possession, rescue as return. Somewhere a door stands open only as suggestion, and the light walks through first, keeping time for those who follow. Human, feline, mourning itself. Thank you for watching until the end. If this story touched your heart even a little, that's our greatest joy. If you'd like, please share your thoughts in the comments. We'll keep bringing you stories that stay with you, so please consider subscribing to the channel. See you in the next video.